Harkin.
Thank you, Lascan Corla. First of all, I want to thank Sinn Féin for the motion we have before us this evening, and I note we also have a counter-motion from Government. Now, your counter-motion lists off all the supports, both once-off and permanent, that you have put in place, and some of those are significant, Minister. I do know of some people who consider that the supports they have been provided with are a type of safety net. While those people are still very stretched, they have noticed the mitigating impact of those supports on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And that is why it's absolutely crucial for those people that there is no cliff edge, that those supports remain in place. The rate of inflation remains high at over 7%, which is on top of the 8% from last year. And while it is stabilising slightly, it's not reduced, it has not gone backwards. And the lump sum and the extra payments that you did put in place are still needed just to keep people going, as it were. And one of the reasons we need to continue many of these payments is because the core social welfare rates have not kept pace with inflation, not even close. So that means those relying on social welfare payments have fallen further and further behind with every 0.1% increase in inflation. And it's really hitting people hard when it comes to the basics. Food inflation, energy inflation. As the Sinn Féin motion tells us, gas bills have increased by around 140% over the last 2 years, and electricity bills have increased by 115%. I believe the Government should strongly consider the recommendations on the index linking of welfare payments put forward by the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission in a recent report. The priority recommendation there is that Government adopts welfare indexation across social welfare policy, development and reform as a matter of priority, and crucially, of course, that qualifying thresholds for supports are adjusted in tandem with indexed welfare payments in order to ensure recipients are not disqualified from these supports that they rely on. Now, I understand, Minister, this is more of a budgetary matter, but when the Government says in its counter-motion that it will keep matters under review, I would ask that the indexation of welfare payments would be part of that review. But, Minister, it's not just those on social welfare payments who are finding it extremely difficult to keep going. It's also those on fixed payments, for example, pensions, not social welfare pensions, but, for example, Class D pensions. I've raised this many times in the House. These are people, and I won't go into the detail here, but through no fault of their own, are on these pensions that are higher than the non-contributory, but they're still quite low. And because they're not on a social welfare payment, they're not able to get, for example, a living alone allowance, fuel allowance, etc. Now, I do recognise that the Minister did ensure that those over 70, for a couple earning less than €1,000 a week, would get the fuel allowance, and that is positive. But it also needs to be extended to those on working family payment, and I believe to those whose income is below a certain level. And I think the level that she put in place for over 70s should be a benchmark for those under 70. I strongly support the call from Sinn Féin to ensure that community welfare officers are available in the community to provide urgent supports and in-person appointments. The in-person appointments are really important because the role of a community welfare officer is literally to ensure the welfare of those in the community who need support, and the one-to-one is really important to establish the level of need and, where appropriate, adequate supports in the form of supplementary welfare allowance. This was a service many people relied on, still rely on. It's their plan B or their plan C, and it's not working the way it should. If a community welfare officer is to ensure the welfare of the most in need in the community, then, Minister, they must be available and they must have sufficient money to ensure urgent supports are provided, and that is not happening. Finally, I want to strongly make the case for small businesses, many of whom continue to be hammered by exorbitant energy prices. It's across all sectors. And I want to make a strong plea to ask Government not to increase the VAT rate from 9 to 13.5%. The tourism hospitality sector is living in dread of this, as are hairdressers. Please don't add to inflation by increasing the VAT rate.